Welcome, gentlemen and gentlewomen. Please bring along your gentle children as well. Today is January the 30th. We are almost about to end January. However, what we are not ending is our series on playing a new character in a new role, trying to bring him up all the way up to Keystone Master and then eventually up to Keystone Hero as well. My choice in our first video to start this series, my choice was Blood Death Knight, because I wanted to play a tank, which I have not really played since forever, but I also didn't want to play the far too meta flavor of the month pick of Protection Warrior, so I went for something else. We ended our first video on basically being heroic ready, getting just enough gear to enter heroic, which was 342 item level, and then spam a whole bunch of heroics to get good enough gear to be ready to enter Mythic Plus. So we got almost at 360 item level back then, so that we could start getting into Mythic Plus. This was by the end of last week. The last couple of days I didn't have too much time to play this character before the reset, so I did however many Mythic Plus keys I could. So when I started, players nowadays are of course much less needy on asking the item level requirements. If this was right at the release of the expansion, right at the release of the season, they would have asked for 370 plus item level characters to start getting into some Mythic Plus keys, but almost 2 months into the season, players were much more lax into inviting players, especially if they are tanks. So I got to start testing out the character into Mythic Plus, and of course what you see into these level of keys is just horror. Okay, it's just very bad. It's just a very bad sight for your eyes. As you can see from this key, this was just one of the few entry level keys I did, and right off the bat, first pull of Ruby Life Pulse, which is, if you have done this key at a reasonably high level, it's a standard pull. You go in, you pick the first 3 packs. Generally speaking, if it's fortified, it's also with Bloodlust. However, this group right off the bat gets 4 deaths. Why? Because nobody was interrupting, because nobody was getting rid of explosives. So there is tons of mistakes happening all over the place. And then we will continue this key, and we will continue to have mistakes left and right. This is something I very quickly, and most players very quickly also, will have to get used to. The amount of mistakes that you're gonna be seeing in lower-ish keys. This is a sentiment that you will hear quite often, that when you do keys all the way up to plus 15, from plus 7, plus 6, plus 7, all the way up to plus 15, you will hear some healers mention, for example, that they feel like they have to heal more. They have to heal more in a plus 11 than they have to heal in a plus 20, because first of all, the amount of mistakes you can do in a plus 20 are much fewer, because you are much more prone to getting one shot in a plus 20. And number 2, because players are of course more knowledgeable. They know more what's going on, they know more how to use their defensives, how to use their health potions, so the healer has to heal them less. Meanwhile, in a plus 7, a plus 9, a plus 11, the amount of clueless play is much higher, and also the amount of mistakes don't get punished nearly as much. You don't get one shot at the very least. So you still have room to take damage and recover, which means the healer has to put in more work. This was my experience in these first few keys I was doing on my tank, because, it's kind of chill at times playing a tank. I'm not saying it's very easy or much more of a laid-back job, but sometimes you have room to just sit back and look at what the rest of your group is doing, and notice basically the amount of mistakes that are going on in the rest of your group, which in this level of keys is quite high. Doing this pack, doing one of these packs right before Herja on Halls of Valor, and having a Demon Hunter spaz out with his Fell Rush and pull the mini boss is just at the order of the day in this type of keys. So it was an interesting experience. You weren't really learning that much in how to play a tank in this type of keys, because of course you're not trying, I wasn't at least trying to impose very very challenging, very min-maxed routes, for example, in these packs. I was trying to not go for any kind of skips, any kind of stealth skips, any kind of particular ways to do the dungeon. I was just trying to do it as straight as possible because I had basically no faith in my group. That is how you have to play. That, at the very least, until you start doing plus 18s, plus 19s is how you should play in Mythic Plus. Assume everyone is a clown. Assume everyone is playing with one hand and one foot, and that's how you have to treat them for the time being, especially as a tank who has to essentially guide the group, has to lead the way. You have to be the one to essentially have a brain and choose what to do, where to go, etc., etc. So I was trying to take it easy when I was doing these few early on low-level dungeons. Since, of course, most of the reason I was doing them was just loot, gear, get higher gear so I can start queuing up or getting invited for higher keys. I wasn't really caring too much about things like score or about things like doing the dungeon properly with a proper route, which is something that eventually you will have to start doing as a tank, since you are the one who is expected to know where to go when you're talking about going into a dungeon. I have to say, these type of dungeons, of course, also don't really help the DPS and the healer too much either. For example, this is a temple of the Jade Serpent, the first couple of packs with the big, dangerous, corrupt living waters doing their big AoE, and you will see that pretty much none of the players in here are even bothering to line of sight the big AoE. Just in case you don't know, you can and you should, at high keys, line of sight this cast right here. And basically nobody cares here. Nobody actually does it, it's completely ignored, but it doesn't matter because it's a +9. Eventually, these players will have to learn to actually line of sight these casts because they start doing a lot of damage in higher keys. But because the key level was low and you can get away with these type of mistakes right now, I was sort of fine with going through, with pushing through, basically brute forcing the key, ignoring mechanics and just brute force the dungeon as far as I was getting my reward at the end of it. So that was fine. I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but I have depleted or disbanded much fewer groups when I was playing on my Death Knight compared to playing on my Evoker. To be fair, playing on an Evoker, trying to do +21 or +22 keys, you are much more prone to the key going wrong very early, and therefore players going, okay, this key is bricked, let's just leave, as opposed to, as mentioned, a +9 or a +8 key where multiple mistakes are not really going to cause you to die, are not really going to cause you to wipe, so you can continue to go on. That's perhaps, or not perhaps, that's definitely why you can deplete way more keys the higher you go in level. After I did a whole bunch of Mythic +7, 8, 9, because I wasn't still quite sure about my gear, about my item level, which was still on the low end. It had gotten just to, 375 something by the end of the week and the start of this new reset. We had some more things coming in 10.0.5. So I started this new week with the freebie of the time walking event, giving me a normal piece of gear. I kind of high rolled the reward because after doing a whole bunch of time walking, I got a 398 trinket, which is quite good as an item level inflator, not too good for a tank trinket, but still good enough for the time being. After that, I had to start getting into the Storm's Fury event, because the Storm's Fury event has some 389 item level reward pieces, so I was gunning for the double 389 rings. At the time, I had a 343 and a 346 ring. They were still my two lowest pieces of gear, so being able to replace them with two 389 rings was going to be some like 4-5 item level increase overall, which was quite juicy. I was also able to get, after the reset, a couple more pieces of gear thanks to the Obsidian Citadel quests. I was able to get 382 shoulders and 379 trinket thanks to those quests, so that was very good in terms of item level increases. And then some more time spent during the storm event to farm the elemental overflow needed to buy those rings. Now, as I was farming that elemental overflow, I also happened to kill one of the mini bosses, the elemental storm mini bosses, which actually gave me a 385 ring. So cool, I don't need now to spend all of my earned overflow for the ring. I will probably keep it to try to buy the necklace, the 389 necklace you can get from the Storm's Fury event. So after the Storm's Fury event was over, being able to replace my ring, plus being able to replace a couple of pieces thanks to the Obsidian quests, as well as a couple more pieces from the open world quests, my item level started getting closer to 380. So that was the point where at 380 I thought it was starting to be a little bit more comfortable to start queuing up for +10 keys. So starting to interact with the seasonal affix that we have for this season, the much loved, the very cared for Thundering affix. To be fair, it's not that the tank cares too much about this affix. You are expected to have your servants, your slaves in your party run to you, so as a tank you don't have to worry too much about the affix. So I started getting into one and I took it quite easy. It just so happened that I was invited to a +11 Shadow Moon Burial Grounds. Okay, fine, I know, it's a joke dungeon, etc. But I wanted to play it safe for the first dungeon above +10 on this character. I also started to tinker around my UI. As you can see, all of a sudden now we have a new Wikora suite, a new set of Wikoras for the character. I thought the initial one I was playing with was, I don't know, I didn't like it too much. So I have started to use as experiments, these keys as experiments, to try to find a set of Wikoras for this character that I am comfortable with. For now though, up to this point, up to this episode 2 of this series, the challenge is not quite there yet. Most of the stuff is still quite trivial, in a sense that you're still allowed to fail by quite a significant margin. You can still have multiple deaths. I have, I think, depleted something like 1 key, and the depleted key was a +4. One of the first keys I ever run with some special kind of DPS players doing some special kind of DPS. That was basically the only depleted key, and most of the others have been quite a breeze in terms of completion. I think I probably died as a tank once, and that was a full wipe because of a multi-pull of, I think, of a genius mage somehow blinking into another pack. So up to now, we still haven't found the challenge part of Mythic Plus, but that's also good. That is good because, as I said, I need to start getting some muscle memory. I need to start getting some feel to the spec on how it plays and how I am supposed to play every pack in every dungeon. So, of course, it would be much harder if I went immediately into content that could two-shot me out of nowhere if I'm still trying to learn how the spec plays. I have to say, even though I am hiding this character from Raider.io, so it can't benefit from my mains rating, and I'm trying to keep it as much of a casual like experience as possible, I am still benefiting, I am still gaining as an advantage the knowledge I have as a healer in these type of keys. Because of course, as a healer myself, I have learned where are the more dangerous parts of a dungeon, the more tricky parts of a dungeon. Not all of them, because I, of course, as a healer, also see very dangerous parts which do AoE group-wide damage. For example, this part right here, the Whispers of the Dark Star, the big AoE on this boss, is very dangerous for the party, yet it's basically irrelevant for the tank, right? All of these situations with plenty of AoE damage, the tank basically doesn't care. Meanwhile, as a healer, I might have missed some very dangerous tank busters, because most of them the tank is dealing with those by himself. So I sometimes not perhaps realized as a healer the situations in which the tank was in high danger, which is something that I am learning now as a tank in these keys. Like, for example, how dangerous some of the mobs I thought were just afterthoughts during trash packs are actually for a tank to face tank, to take the frontal, the brute damage of those mobs. I am learning it now, playing a tank. So this is where we have gotten it up to this second part of this series, starting to get into the +10 range. So far, not too much challenge yet, but it's bound to increase. The next part of the challenge is going to be trying to get my primal focus and eventually my concentrated primal focus, because of course, being a late leveled character, I am sitting on 5 sparks of ingenuity, which means I have technically possibly 5 different 418 item level pieces I could have, but I currently don't because I am lacking the primal chaos. But the primal chaos is not an issue because it will come by completing Mythic Plus keys. What I am missing, of course, is the primal focus or the concentrated primal focus, because you need 10 of them per craft. So even if I can craft 5 of them, I need 50 at the very least. +10 keys or 50 +15 keys to even start getting these crafted items. So that is going to require quite a good amount of grinding, which is what I will have to do on this character. As far as the tier set, which is quite decent for a Blood Death Knight, of course, thanks to the Catalyst, I have a chest piece already from Mythic Plus, which is quite decent to level up and transform into a tier piece. And then next week, we will see from the vault if I get a new piece, or from just doing Mythic Plus this week, if I can get a shoulder piece or a helmet or a pair of gloves or a pair of pants to get the second piece for the Catalyst to turn into a tier set next week. But for now, towards the end of this week, not quite yet, on this Monday, we can say goodbye to this Death Knight character. As usual, saying our goodbyes, we can start by thanking all of my Patreon supporters for their contribution and their help to the growth of this channel. You can still, as usual, support in other ways that don't include having to spend money, liking and commenting down below, as well as subscribing to the channel itself are perfectly fine ways to show your support. Lastly, you can also follow me on Twitter for more support and also to check out any news, any information I might want to give out all of my viewers, as well as, of course, you can find me on Twitch streaming as well from 10 p.m. Central European Times, 1 p.m. Pacific, and 4 p.m. Eastern US time zones. With this out of the way, thank you guys again for watching. See you guys soon, and in the meantime, just in time to stop the video, I just felt my voice starting to get a bit coarse and dry, so perfect time to stop.